I just watched Seaspiracy, and here are my thoughts part 2. As far as content goes, I thought the conclusion was a little off base. Basically, they concluded the best thing you could do is not eat seafood. Which, yes, I also don't eat meat and I agree with, but I thought he did such a good job of connecting the dots along the way to make people understand how we could throw off an entire ecosystem by overfishing. I also like that he added in how the humanitarian crisis that's caused by the fishing industry is such a big issue. But after connecting all those dots, then he goes back to, oh, I guess we shouldn't eat fish. He really drove it back in that it was an individual issue and came down to the lives of individual animals, which I don't disagree with, but it makes it seem impossible to conquer this issue because not eating cans of tuna isn't going to change everything. Overall, I just don't think it could be summed up in one simple fix. There's a whole process at hand that needs to change. But I mean, it's better talked about than not talked about at all.
Part 2 of the issues that I have with Seaspiracy. The majority of the statistics that they presented were incredibly questionable. So if you do decide to watch this, make sure that you are looking at their sources and seeing if you can find those same statistics in other more reputable sources as well. They also had a lot of activists speaking on some of these issues, which is fine, but they did not have enough scientists. If you're going to be speaking on ocean conservation issues, you need some ocean conservation experts. And yes, they had a few, but I feel like they needed a lot more. I think they brought up a lot of really interesting ocean conservation issues, but they twisted them to be presented in a way that's different from the reality of the situation. They also make it seem like the answer to ocean conservation is very simple, and that's just not true. These are very complex issues, and it seems like a lot of people are being left out of the conversation. So if you want to watch this documentary, fine, but please, please, please do your extra research on the side. Double check their stats and claims because a lot of them were either misinformed or blatantly false. Personally, I don't recommend that people watch this documentary. It seems to me that they use a lot of emotional manipulation to skew your opinion on things, and it's very one-sided. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching.
Hey, stop Asian hate.
Yeah,
Also, Black Lives Matter because we're all just human beings, so don't be racist and just support your own race.
I know,
What, a meat eater? You know they abuse them before they slaughter them, so are you a piece of shit or what?
sometimes, but I also eat...
Fish, what a piece of shit you are. Listen, child labor, human trafficking, there's still war going on, and 2 billion people don't have drinkable water because there's feces inside, and people have diarrhea and die a slow death. But go ahead, get out of bed and do comedy.
Well, can I just lay here for like 30 more minutes?
After all that I told you, you want to sleep more? What a lazy piece of shit.
3 Seaspiracy claims debunked. Oceans will be virtually empty of fish by 2048. This is from a 2006 study whose lead author has cast doubt on whether the findings are still applicable today. Overfishing is one of the many problems the ocean is facing, but in marine protected areas and places where fishing is regulated properly, fish stocks are doing well. 46% of plastic in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is fishing nets. This is from a study in 2018, but it needs a bit more context. Fishing gear is mainly fixed, so is more buoyant and tends to break down more slowly, whereas plastic straws and bags tend to disintegrate and fall to the seabed. Marine microorganisms absorb 4 times more CO2 than the Amazon. Experts agree that this claim is true, but it could even be an underestimate as some phytoplankton absorb more carbon than others. Share and follow if you found this interesting.
So what is the maximum number of dolphins that can be killed for the tuna to have the dolphin safe label? 0. No dolphins must be harmed, obviously. Oh wow, so you can guarantee that no dolphins were harmed? No, we can't guarantee anything. It's the ocean. We don't know what's going on out there. But then, how can you label the tuna dolphin safe? Well, we do have observers that go out there. How often? Oh, they don't need to go very often. Every time they go, they get a huge chunk of change from all the bribes. The what? The who? But if someone wants to ensure that they're buying tuna that's dolphin safe, what do? They can buy the tuna that has our dolphin safe label on it. But you just said that you can't guarantee anything. We can pretty much guarantee it's dolphin safe. You just said that you can't. The world is a difficult place.
1, 2, 3, 4. I think I'm losing my mind, trying to stay inside the lines. It's like you're running in place. How you keep staying the same.
Learn to save the ocean. What is bycatch? Bycatch is the marine life that is killed while fishers are catching another species. Putting out a huge net to catch tuna inevitably catches other species in the process. Those lost individuals are the bycatch. For large-scale industrial fishing, bycatch rates are high and very harmful to our ocean ecosystem.
Wow.
You have to see this. It's so bad. Not tomorrow. Now. Toss it.
Learn to save the ocean. What is bottom trawling?
Bottom trawling is an industrial fishing technique where a huge net is dragged along the seafloor behind a huge boat to catch species like cod, squid, and fish that live on the seafloor. It is one of the most destructive fishing practices because it rakes up everything in its path, including coral and sensitive bottom habitat. Midwater trawling goes for species like sardine and anchovies, and while it's less destructive to the bottom environment because it's in the middle of the water column, it still has high rates of bycatch.
This is part 2 of the problems that I have with the documentary Seaspiracy. In the film, he talks about fishing regulations, marine conservation areas, and sustainable fishing as these false solutions that aren't true and won't work. And that's just a generalization that's not true across the board. There are plenty of places, including the island nation of Palau, that has successfully implemented aggressive fishing regulations and have effectively restored the fish population in their areas. And not including stories about when these solutions do work creates this false narrative that these problems are impossible to solve, and they're not. And there's all these parts in the documentary where he's like, this organization doesn't want to talk to me, it's because they're hiding something. No, it's because you didn't make an appointment and didn't get a press pass and didn't get a permit. It's the entitlement for me. A lot of the interviews seem to be cut in really misleading ways, including the interview he does with this person, Diana Cohen from the Plastic Pollution Coalition. If you want to know what they really do, my team is going to be interviewing her tomorrow on Clubhouse. I'll put the link in my bio.
So I watched Seaspiracy. It's a documentary about how industrial fishing is actually destroying our oceans, and the oceans are responsible for 90% of the oxygen even we humans breathe. So we really need to figure this out. They kind of position like vegan fish options or like vegan meats as a potential solution. What I don't understand about all these environmental documentaries is how they're not talking about the root cause, which is capitalism. Capitalism is a system built on earning profits. You can't have profits without exploiting something, either land resources, natural resources, or human resources. So either we destroy the environment or we have slaves. And right now we have a fun combination of both. Because after watching this movie, people are going to be like, well, why don't we just stop industrial fishing? Well, we can't, because someone has to earn a profit and it's related to all these other people earning profits and blah, 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 blah. We also won't solve racism under capitalism. Why? Because racism was invented so that we had a class of people that we could exploit in order to earn a profit. And we still have that. We still have modern day slaves in every brown country in the world.
So I want to talk about this new documentary for a second. So if you didn't know, Seaspiracy is a new documentary on Netflix that talks about how the world's oceans are dying, how marine animals are dying, how like plastic pollution, all that. As someone who's plant-based and has been plant-based for 3 years now, there's some problems with it. And this is the same problem that I have with most environmental documentaries that come out. At the end of this documentary, when they wrap up and say like what you can do to help stop all this, the main thing that they say is that you can eat plant-based seafood. Now I live in Toronto where it's vegan heaven. Vegan food everywhere, like there's no problem finding plant-based options. I don't know of one place where I can get plant-based seafood for an affordable price. The problem with like mainstream environmental thinking is that it always places the blame on the individual. And not once in this documentary did it address the root cause, which is our old friend, capitalism. By placing that burden on the individual and saying that in order to make a change, you need to eat plant-based foods, it is not inclusive. People who are marginalized, lower income, in food deserts, they don't have access to plant-based seafood. All these issues with the oceans are so important. Rather than placing the blame on the individual, we need to place the blame on the systems that allow it to happen in the first place.
Okay, so everyone's talking about this documentary, Seaspiracy, right? And I actually work for an environmental solutions company and I make media for them, and I'm gonna tell you why this documentary has issues. So does the documentary raise awareness about really important issues like overfishing and slavery at sea? Yeah, it does. These are issues I've spoken to conservationists and people at the UN about before, and these are all very pressing problems, but it's the way that these issues are presented in the film that I have an issue with. The film spends a lot of time talking about overfishing in Thailand, Japan, and West Africa as if it's all these countries' fault, and he doesn't really talk about the countries that are creating the demand for this fish by importing it, including more white-centric countries like the US and places in Europe. Okay, and then there's this part where he's talking about a fishery observer in the Philippines who went missing, and this, bruh. I'm Filipino, and our language hasn't looked like this in hundreds of years. Why make this choice if not to create a sense of otherness? Seems odd and problematic to me. Part 2,